2 years ago, I looked at the lack of political diversity on the ABC TV's program The Drum. It's a weekly or nightly panel show, and I showed how it was relentlessly skewed to the Green left, antagonistic to Conservatives, and it went out of its way to shun anyone from the Institute of Public Affairs. These findings were vindicated by last year's election coverage review conducted for the ABC by former BBC advisor Kerry Blackburn, who revealed a heavy left-of-centre bias on The Drum. This week, we decided to look at the national broadcaster's weekly political panel show, Insiders. Now, there is some subjectivity involved in all of this, as we decided the best way to categorise panellists was not by party or left versus right, but by those with a conservative bent, say Greg Sheridan from The Australian, those who we would portray as impartial or neutral, such as the ABC's Stan Grant or The Australian's Rosie, and then the anti-conservatives, ranging from green left champions such as The Guardian Australia's Katharine to the small L liberals who rail against conservatives such as The Australian's Niki Savva. We went back over every episode for the past 12 months, and of the 142 appearances, just 22, or only 15%, represented the Conservative side of the debate. We figured that only 10 spots, or just 7%, were taken by neutral or impartial commentators, and a whopping 110, that's 77%, or more than three-quarters, were anti-conservatives, people whose commentary is typically antagonistic to conservative policies, values and politicians. Now, we also looked at where the panellists came from, and surprise, surprise, the ABC topped the list with more than a quarter of all the panellist spots. The fringe left website, the Australian version of The Guardian, took 13% of the slots, and their green left comrades at the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age took 11%. Commentators from News Corp made up just under 25%, or a quarter of the panellists. That might sound fairer than it actually was, because of the 35 appearances by News Corp commentators, 22, or more than 60% of them, were in the anti-conservative camp. We're talking those like the Australian columnist and 10 political editor Peter Van Onselen, news.com.au's Samantha Maiden, and the Sunday Telegraph's Annika Smethurst, who's now the political editor at The Age. But these stats are not a huge surprise, especially when we see weekly examples like these.
I think what we're going to get from this inquiry is we're going to understand how colonisation is still leading to the contemporary issues that we face today.
But it does mean that the Australian government is way out of step, that the idea of a gas-led recovery is really looking way out of step with the rest of the world.
I don't for the life of me understand how any Conservative commentator could ever go for someone as vile as Donald Trump. It says more about how puddle deep they are.
State Labor premiers have learned over the last several months, because of the way the Commonwealth has rounded on Daniel Andrews, that the Commonwealth won't be there backing you in.
Privilege is about when you don't understand how much power you have.
Wow, would that be, for example, the privilege of being a $1.1 billion taxpayer-funded behemoth and treating with contempt your statutory obligations for political impartiality and hosting a diversity of ideas?